In continuing to look at our life of Christ, we look now to Luke chapter 1, verse 5 to 25. It's the first major story, the first event really, that is chronological in the New Testament. And this story talks about the promise, or the announcement really, of the birth of John the Baptist. It concerns Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth, and there is a particular day in which Zechariah, a Jewish priest, is going to Jerusalem to do his duty since he is a priest. And I don't want to read through all of the verses. There's about 21 verses here, but over the next few next couple of the or two or three of the devotions that I have, I want to kind of focus on this passage in different ways. But the first thing I want to talk about is how this pronouncement of John's birth is stated to us here in this passage. And it says that he will be great in the eyes of the Lord. He must never touch wine or other alcoholic drinks. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth. And then it says, and he will turn many Israelites to the Lord their God. He will be a man with the spirit and power of Elijah. He will prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and he will cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly. Now, there's a lot in that statement, but this is what I want to show you. This is the first event in the New Testament, chronologically. And it's the first event after God has been silent for nearly 400 years. The last book to be written, and the last time God spoke, you would say this, in human history, revealed himself was through the prophet Malachi. It's the final book of the Old Testament. And what's interesting is if you go back to Malachi, to the end of the book of Malachi, you find something very, very interesting here. It's in chapter 4, and it says, remember to obey the law of Moses, my servant, all the decrees, the regulations that I gave him on Mount Sinai for all Israel. It's as though God is giving that final command to remind the people and to remind people throughout the upcoming years, which God's not going to speak again. Nothing's going to happen. Well, things are going to happen in human history, but God is not going to intervene and speak into human history in that way for another 400 and something years. We call it the silent years, the intertestamental period. It's what separates the Old Testament from the New Testament. However, notice how the book ends. It's verse 5 and 6. He says, look, I am sending you the prophet Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord arrives. His preaching will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. Otherwise, I will come and strike the land with a curse. You want to know what is happening in the last two verses of the last chapter of the book of Malachi, which is the last two verses of the Old Testament? It is a prophecy. The prophecy about someone coming. Well, it literally says, I'm sending you the prophet Elijah. But notice the language there, right? His preaching will turn the hearts of fathers to their children, hearts of children to their fathers. That is exactly the wording that the angel gave to Zechariah. When Zechariah meets the angel, or literally the angel comes in to the Holy of Holies and makes the pronouncement. It's the angel Gabriel, the same angel that had spoken to Daniel many years before. Gabriel says, I stand in the very presence of God, and it was he who sent me to bring you this good news. The time had come. The time had come for John the Baptist to be born, who would prepare the way for the Messiah. So it is as though God picks up exactly where he finished and left off in the Old Testament. You see, some people would say that there's such a big difference from the Old Testament to the New Testament. The God of the Old Testament is not the same as the God of the New Testament. No, it's the same God. They're wrong. It is the same God. And God is just picking up right where he left off from the Old Testament, even though human history has gone for over 400 years without God saying anything. Now God is speaking again, and God's going to do something again. The Messiah, the promised one from the Old Testament, is going to come into this world. Wow. What a wonderful truth. Blessings to all of you. And in our next devotional, we'll continue to look more about Zechariah and Elizabeth and the announcement of the birth of John the Baptist.